Hey there, and welcome back to the Total Potential Podcast. It's Cole, and I'm so excited to be joined today by my colleague and friend and mentor, Jim Brault. Jim is just a remarkable human being for over 35 years. Guys, he's been at this for like a hot minute. He has been helping individuals and teams and organizations really reach for and realize their potential. He is a master coach. He has a master's degree from Cornell University. He's currently pursuing his doctorate in psychology, which I'm fascinated by and can't wait to learn more about. In the early 90s, he owned one of the most successful franchises of peak performance expert Tony Robbins. I mean, talk about like, you're all the way in with that, right? He was the chief human resources officer for a Fortune 500 company. He's lived abroad. He is a certified unbeatable mind coach like Jake and myself. He also graduated from Unbeatable Mind's sister company, SealFit, from their Kokoro camp, which is a massive physical crucible. He is the author of 4 books. And it's just, I mean, the guy holds like multiple black belts and is a yoga and meditation teacher and just an all-around remarkable human being. Jim has a amazing new app, the Mind Jim Brault app. Which is all about meditation, visualization, and starting to create a whole new reality that you get to see through your mind's eye. I cannot wait to find out all about this and all the amazing insights that Jim has to share with us today. Thank you so much for being here with me today. How are you?
I'm doing great, Cole. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. We get to talk about one of my maybe most favorite things today, which are, the internal practices that
Yeah.
start to inform our external environment, right?
Yep.
But before we get into that, you've been in this world for a long time.
You call
What?
me old?
No, I am not calling you old. I'm calling you experienced.
I have been in this world for a long
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
Also, this development, realizing your
Okay.
potential, that world
Yeah.
as
Got
well.
it.
When you think of some of like the more significant influences you had that led you to pursue, this personal development space, what
Hmm.
stands out to you as those kind of like light bulb moments that you're like, oh, I kind of want to learn more, do more?
Yeah, that's great. So, I took my first psychology class when I was a senior in high school, and I just fell in love. I just like, this is fantastic. And I guess up till then, I wrestled in high school and college, and I saw how important the mindset was
Mm,
because whatever you practice, you had certain abilities, you trained, but then I would always see a difference between someone's kind of potential than how they did on the mat, and myself too.
hmm
And so originally I kind of wanted to improve my own capability. And then I went to undergrad for psychology and got more involved and looked at the physiological aspects, the developmental aspects, different approaches to therapy. There's over 500, which most people don't know. It's like, oh,
Wow.
wow. And they all work. So then I went to school for HR. I was kind of clinical psych or HR, ended up being in HR, and I saw, even at very high levels, so kind of maybe the peak of professional career in HR, I was the chief human resources officer for a Fortune 500. And individually, where I saw people struggle had nothing to do with how smart they are. They
Mm,
super smart, great experience, global run, multi-billion-dollar divisions. Like, that was not the issue. It was always something emotionally.
mm,
Struggled with, listening, coming across as arrogant or losing their temper. Like, but they would never lose it in a kind of like with customers. But
mm.
internally, I'd be like, holy smokes, like the emotional maturity is not, some people were, but it wasn't as high as I would have thought.
Sure.
But earlier in my career, so I had sort of that psychology background. I'm back in school for my doctorate now. But let's see, I had a franchise with Tony Robbins for 4 years in the early 90s. So I got to know him really well.
Yeah.
Yeah, huge guy, just enormous. And he really took a lot of different theories and approaches and techniques from psychology and then kind of packaged them in a very unique and practical way. You
Sure.
know, I look at it, I said, oh, I know what you're doing there. Oh, I see that. And now, like some of the stuff I didn't know, and now I'm studying, I'm go, oh, you got that from this guy or this woman.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, you know, he was around mindset, around beliefs, state, you know, changing your state and your value system. So he has Date with Destiny, and you know, you walk across the coals. So I learned a lot from him. Then I sold that and started working with a yoga teacher. And he was a Kundalini yoga teacher. So a lot of breath work, a lot of yoga, a lot of meditation. And then I think the next kind of maybe big influence was Mark Divine. So I saw him in 2012. I'm sure you talked about it on your podcast with Unbeatable Mind and SEAL Fit. And I saw that hard military style training that they used to prep members to go to, you know, SEAL training. Just phenomenal. Look at how to train your mind. Of course, you went to 12-hour. And you learn a lot about yourself. Yeah, you get trained physically, but so much is emotion and so much is mental and so much is like you're caring about other people, not just, oh, I can ramble it and get through it.
Yeah.
And then working with Unbeatable Mind, that definitely helped. And I guess probably the last big influence was a guy named Milton Erickson, who is a psychiatrist. He was born, I think, 1903 or something, and lived till kind of the mid 80s. And he was really the father, if you will, of medical hypnosis. But he was also a psychiatrist, and he would work with people in family systems and therapy. So he was a marriage and family counselor as well. And so I look at, like, how did he use hypnosis and therapy to help people? And I have on my shelf like 24 books of his or about him. And so I studied that a lot. I got training in hypnotherapy too. So
Yeah.
I look at it like, all right, what can you use from your unconscious in this kind of altered state, which is a very natural state? Then how do you look at the constellation of where you are? Do you have brothers and sisters? What's your family look like? How do they work together? How does that relationship influence, you know, you? And then what are your habits, your patterns of thinking? But then how does that show up in your body? Because a lot of people look at, well, I'm thinking this way. It's like, great, but your emotional brain is faster than your thinking brain.
Right.
Right? Like not
like
it's
so
not
much faster.
So there's kind of three parts of the brain. So the sometimes called the reptilian brain, but like sort of the brain stem that does, and sort of the emotional brain is everything that a baby can do. Regulate temperature, eat, drink, digest, eliminate, cry, feel pain, feel pleasure, like all those things can do a lot, but it doesn't really think, you know, so that takes a while. And so they're very powerful, but in some ways basic things. And then you have that neo or new cortex, and then you think. But like, if you put your finger on a hot stove, you pull it away before you go, oh, that's hot, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so when we get activated, triggered, whatever you want to call it, we have an emotional response before we think about it.
Right.
And then later you're like, yeah, that didn't make that much sense.
Yeah.
Right? But it's like, yeah, but that was because it was your emotions. And sometimes those emotions can overtake us. And then we go down and we're on this path and we're like, you're like, oh, God, I can't believe I did that again.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you know, like at some point, like I'll be 60 next month, and we have 6 grandchildren. They're all at different ages, you know, and like some are getting teeth. Our 6-year-old daughter has shark teeth. She's got her 2 bottom teeth, but the other ones are coming in behind them.
Oh.
And they're like rows of teeth. We're like, look, I got shark teeth. That's cool, Riley. But, you can see like, oh, he's 2 or she's 4 or, and then you're like, oh, they're a teenager. Oh, they're 30. At some point you're like, when are you going to stop making excuses? Like,
Yeah.
it's going to be, well, they're 80. So,
Yeah.
at some point,
Then it flips to different excuses.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
different excuses.
I'm
But yeah,
s-
those are the major influences. I guess the other one, I've studied martial arts for a long time, started in 83, but uh, since like 91, I've been working with a guy named Francis Fong, who's originally from Hong Kong, but he lives in Atlanta. And separate from the martial art, just the energy, the
hmm.
qigong, if you will, and amazing. And some people I don't need people to believe me. Like
Yeah.
I know it's true, but like he can move people without touching them, like from a
Sure.
distance, but he'll go like this. The person can't see him. Like point to the knee, and the knee will buckle.
Hmm.
And one time, I lived in the UK for like 4 years, and I was at a seminar in Rome with him, and he said, "Put out your hand." So I'm like, "Okay." He made this middle finger. He didn't. He just was looking at it, and that one went so
Back and
fast.
forth.
Like
Oh my gosh.
I can't even move it that fast for myself. I'm like, what the
Right.
heck? That's so freaky. So it's like, wow, there's a lot of stuff out there that we kind of, or at least I don't totally understand.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, okay, how do you use this uh qigong, this flow of energy, whatever you want to call it, this flow? Because when we get stressed, we tense, we stop. It's
Right.
like, how do you use sensory experience, not just visualization, because I think it's too limited, but all senses? How do you go forward in time and backwards in time? Because guess what? Everything you get triggered on, that's
Yeah.
in the past.
It's
So
back.
how do you get that? How do you look at your breath, using breath work? How do you use therapeutic approaches? Not therapy, but it's like, hey, you can use it for mental wellness or
Yeah.
mental health. It doesn't have to be, uh, a clinical application for it.
Yeah.
And so I look at all these and go, oh, these are really cool. How can I help people in this area? Like, but put
Yeah.
them all together in a unique kind of fun way. Cause I think there's a lot of apps out there that are meditative. And
Sure.
I'm like, yeah, I love those if I'm in that mood. If I'm not, I'm like, oh my God, speed up, like,
Yeah.
go faster. Um, but I see like, well, how can you use the body? How can you use the mind in a way that just gives people those skills to then use in your life?
Yeah. I love that you use the example of like the unconscious triggering, like that emotional response that then later, because I don't know about your experience, but my experience around parenting is that like because our formative influences of our being parented are
Yeah.
so subconscious that there's so many things as parents that we do and it just kind of like shoom flies out of us, and
Yeah.
it's that emotional subconscious like reactive space. And it can be really challenging to like find the balance around,
Mm,
you know how do I actually want to respond? And what was it that pressed my button to begin with? And, all
mm,
those things. So give me a little bit of an example. So let's say you're taking something like that challenge. Like, wow, I see myself as a parent. There's something I don't love about how I show up in that way.
yeah.
How might you take something like that into the mind gym and begin to work with it?
Yeah. Great question. So a couple things that just sort of set the stage. One is brainwaves. So in the link to breath.
Hmm.
Okay. So most adults breathe kind of 16 to 20 times a minute. And that corresponds to a brainwave pattern called beta. And it's just hertz, it's just cycles per second. Okay. And at high beta, which was a lot of how we walk around, people feel a little anxious and they don't
Mhm.
know why. It's just like, I got to do something. Like when you slow down your breath and your brain waves down to alpha, that's more creative. There's different neurotransmitters, hormones, et cetera. So all good things, helps with your memory, but it's and these are cyclic. So right when we wake up and right before we go to bed, we're in alpha. And then if we're daydreaming, people are like, I would love to daydream. I don't have any time, but so you're in that state. And then if you go even further down, theta, which is even slower, you get access to the unconscious or subconscious, very restorative, very healing, and even more neurotransmitters. So I haven't seen any research like how do you map it. I remember my yoga teacher saying like, if you slow it down, then it'll be this brainwave. But I've
Sure.
actually never seen that research that it's like you can map, exactly overlay it. You'd have to be hooked up, right, to see where you are. But directionally, it's right. So you start to slow down your breath, and then you go and relaxation and all that. And then you're in I mean, people would say it's a trance state, but an altered state. Like we're in it all the time. We're driving and we're like, how did I just get here?
Yeah.
Like I must have been paying attention, but oh my
Right.
God, like it's scary, right? You're like,
Yeah.
oh my God. But oh, I'm home,
Mm.
because your unconscious mind can do a lot.
So
So,
much. Yeah.
so you go down, and so first it's slow your breath down. Two, slow your brain waves down. So here's an interesting fact. From 0 to 2, so below theta is delta. So from age 0 to 2 years old, the primary brain wave is delta. Okay. From 2 to 7 is theta. It's very magical thinking. Think about everything you learn and believe from 2 to 7. Think about everything you learn about relationships from 2 to 7. Who were your role models? Whoever took care of you, your parents, grandparents, whoever, that's your role model. So for 5 years, and a lot of psychologists would say, the majority of our beliefs are formed from age 2 to 7. So, okay, they were formed in age 2 to 7. What brainwave patterns? Theta. Okay. So now you're an adult walking around in beta and you're like, oh, I want to change that. Yeah, but that's like me going, how do I play this 8-track tape in my phone? Right? I got all these really cool, or I got my net, right? You're like, no, it's two different systems.
Major mismatch. Yeah.
Major mismatch. So a lot of times people try to shift in the wrong state. And I'm not saying it doesn't work. Of course it works. There's cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, a lot of other things, or rational emotive behavior therapy, and other things that, you look at it consciously, like, oh, what are my beliefs? Like, oh, yeah, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't always happen. Or solutions focused brief therapy. It's like, oh, well, when was that an exception? When did that not happen? So there's definite value at a cognitive level to think through stuff. Of course there is.
Sure.
I just think it's somewhat incomplete, because you're like, wait a minute, you form this belief and you have a bodily response that was formed in this brainwave pattern. Well, guess what? Those link.
Sure.
They just do, right? They get linked. Because then you're like, oh, well, you get triggered, and you're like, I don't know why. I'm so I push my buttons.
Yeah.
Okay, logically, you could be like, yeah, that doesn't make sense. And okay, next time I'm going to do this. Cool, it does work. But what if you went down to theta again? Go down in your mind gym. And then it's not really like a dream, but a little bit dream-like. And then, and this happened all the time. A guy I was working with, a client, so he's a special forces officer, like not a guy that gets rattled, right?
Yeah.
And was deployed, like was in combat, had killed, like, all significant stress things. But he was dealing with an issue, a parenting issue, where he was getting triggered by his child. And so we went down into the mind gym, and we kind of had him play this movie. like, watch yourself do this. And he's like,
Mm.
oh, I got it.
Mm.
Because I could say like, well, how does that feel? When this happens, and he'll start telling me things. Well, I'm thinking this and I don't know why. That's great. But that's not the first thing.
Yeah.
It's not the first thing. Something else happens. It's your breath change. It's you feel a tension. You might hear something. The thought is not the first thing.
Right.
It's not. And so if you have like a pattern of, oh, I stop breathing, or I tense my neck or my back, or like the energy just seems to stop. And then you go, I can't believe they're doing this again. And then you get, then it's going.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
going. That snowball's rolling down the hill, picking up steam. So we're like, if you can see that very first thing, or feel that very first thing, or hear that very first thing, then you can cut it off. You interrupt it. So kind of a long answer, but it's like saying, well, could you go into a gym and do Olympic weightlifting your very first day? No, you get hurt. you get hurt. There'd be some other fundamental things that you would need to do. So like in the mind gym, we go through breath work, like how to do breath work just to calm your mind down. Then it's, maybe drawing a box so you can concentrate. You just draw a box. And then you're like, oh, maybe it was a black background with white lines, or a white background with black lines. Most people, it's just that. Okay, now what if you made them colors, or made them thicker, or switch the background color? Okay, now put it behind you. What? Yeah, put it behind you. Oh, now it feels different, right? Now put it there. So you're just learning a skill. You're learning to slow your breath down. You're learning to, now all you're doing is, visualizing.
Yeah.
Now you're like, create a 3-dimensional box and feel it. Go reach out in your mind, right? And you feel it. It's like when you see those people with virtual reality and they're like,
yeah.
So it's kind of your own virtual reality, and feel that fabric, whatever it is. And now you lift off the ground, and now you're flying. Do you feel the wind? Do you feel sun? What do you smell? Are you over the ocean?
Yeah.
Do you taste it, like the salt air? So now you start to get practice in using all your senses, and then we can go backwards in time and forward in time. So there's a lot of sort of foundational skills, or that skill of flowing. So if you have that skill of flowing, then when you're not flowing, you feel it fast, right? Because you walk around like this, you're like, what do you mean? I'm fine.
All
really?
tensed.
Yeah, look, no, cool. But if you learn to flow, then you're like, oh, like I used to do this with people with dumbbells. Like I'd say, okay, grab a 10-pound dumbbell and a 3-pound dumbbell, and make really strong fists and hold it, squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. Can you tell the difference in the weight? And then most people say, no. Relax. Oh, yeah, this one's definitely heavier.
Yeah.
Why? Because when you're tense, you can't, unless it's like, 70 pounds in two.
Like crushing.
Yeah. Like, of course. But it can be a lot different, and you won't feel it because you're so tense. But then when you relax, you feel it. So that's one of the other things. So we kind of go through, right, here are the basics. Week 1. Week 2 is, how do you get that flow? Feel that flow using water, using just different ways. And a lot of times it's your own experience.
Yeah.
Right? We've all been in water. We've all been in a whatever. And then you start to look at, all right, where are you triggered?
I'm excited that this podcast is brought to you by mkforhealth.com. Have you been looking for a powerful antioxidant to help support your immune health? Hello, of course we have. Look no further. mkforhealth.com offers an amazing product called Nutrimetrics OPC3. This product is an isotonic-capable food supplement chock full of powerhouse antioxidants. Ingredients like citrus extract bioflavonoids, bilberry, grapeseed, red wine, and pine bark extracts, all incredible antioxidants. Then you have the OPCs. The oligomeric proanthocyanidins are bioflavonoids found in fruits, vegetables, and certain tree barks that have exceptional benefit to the human body. Studies have shown that these OPCs are up to 20 times more powerful than vitamin C and 50 times more powerful than vitamin E in neutralizing free radicals. Hello, sign me up for that. Nutrimetrics OPC3 also contains the only isotonic form of pygaginol in the world. Number 1, remember, isotonic, readily absorbed. Number 2, pygaginol, my new favorite word, is a natural plant extract from the bark of a French maritime pine tree, and it is the most clinically researched and potent bioflavonoid found. If you're ready to support your immune health and modulate inflammation in your system, all with incredible powerhouse antioxidants, natural extracts, and ingredients, this is your product. Go to www.mkforhealth.com to purchase your Nutrimetrics OPC3 today. That's www.mk4health.com.
I love this so much because I think it's a lot less intimidating to just know that you don't have to go like deep diving without a guide, right out of the gate, that there are these, foundational skills and steps. And I also, I'm not totally sure, and I'd be so interested to know more about your experience with this. My own experience is that for a lot of people, they're really, really distant from their body. Like they couldn't tell you how they really feel about anything because it's become so cognized.
Yeah.
What do you notice? What is it like for people when they start to get out of just the brain thinking mind and into their body and their senses and what they are feeling? Like what comes up to the surface once they make that connection?
So generally they're way more relaxed. Way more relaxed. They start to realize how much tension they have. So I read a person said that we walk around with 50% more tension than we need. Like if you think of a toddler, 2 or 3 year old, like they're incredibly strong. Like you ever, like you're holding a kid and they go backwards, they just,
and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to drop you.
Yeah. But you're like, okay, as an adult, do that. That is your ab strength, your core, it's super hard. And they just keep doing it. They're laughing and they fall back. But then like feel their muscles. They're so loose.
True.
Right. So the very first thing is people go, oh my gosh, I'm so tense. That's the first thing. And also a lot of pain disappears. So this morning we were doing some training and it was kind of like, not too much guidance, but just like kind of like a balloon. You don't tell a balloon, okay, balloon, you're going to go there. It's like, no, it's going to go, or a cloud, right? It'll kind of go in the direction it wants to go. So, it's like, hey, allow your mind to go where it needs to go and just relax. And then you can get back into memories. And maybe there was a memory of a time that you didn't have much to do. There was nowhere to be, no place to go, nothing to do. Or those times in your life where you're in bed and you didn't have to get up and you're like, just 5 more minutes. And you just had that experience. Or I remember very clearly, we have 3 kids, adults now, but I remember like having that baby on your chest and they're all a little hot and they're just breathing and you're like so connected. That's like one of the best feelings in the world. And so you can imagine yourself lying down on a couch or a bed, whatever, and you have this baby on you and you feel them breathing and you're so loving. And then you can just remember that. And then all of a sudden, it's like they don't have a body. They just don't feel it. And then we come back and they're like, oh, my neck, my low back. I remember one guy, he's like, he had a cold. He could barely breathe. Then he started doing this work. And he said that whole time his breathing was perfect. And then when he came out of it, he got stuffy again.
Yeah.
So it's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing.
It's so cool. Okay, so people walk through some of these foundational steps as they start to go through the mind gym process. What does it look like once they're doing more visualization work? And what do you say to the people who say that they don't like they're not able to access visualization? Because I know a lot of people will, I don't see anything when I close my eyes, or, aren't sure how to relate to it. How do you help those people kind of tap into that skill?
Yeah. So I would ask them, what color was your first house? And you make a picture in your mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a lot of times people start visualizing by creating something, like think of an apple, and just go to memories. Memories are
Yeah.
are a lot. Visual, olfactory memories are so strong. You go back and whap, you're 20, 30, 50 years back in time from a
Sure.
smell. So I usually say two things. One is I ask them a question and they automatically, oh, how did you see that color? Isn't that a visualization? Like,
Yeah.
well, yeah. Okay. And then the other thing is, it's a skill like anything else.
Yeah.
Right? Did you come out of the womb being able to write? No. Did you come out of the womb play an instrument? No, you learned. So what most people do is they say they can't do it, which really means you haven't practiced it, but actually you're a lot better at it than you think.
Yeah. I mean, I've had a lot of experiences with visualization that end up being really surprising. Right? Like the mind, the intuition, like whatever it is that's moving through that visualization,
Yeah.
kind of provides like a piece of information you weren't maybe aware of. What are some of like the kind of surprising things that happen for people when they do start accessing what's possible through their mind's eye?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things we do is called the 3 guides. So you go down in your mind gym, and your mind gym, just like work, like you may have a home gym you go to, it's a place, or you could say, oh, I'm going to go for a run or a walk or ride a bike. So you're training, but you're outside, or you go for a swim, or you go to a commercial gym. So the mind gym is all of that. So sometimes you're going to a lake, sometimes you're going to a beach, sometimes you're flying, you're making something up. And sometimes you go to your mind gym, and that can be outside, it could be inside this place you constructed, whatever. So so one of the things we do is called the 3 guides, and people go down, so they sort of relax. And then we have them go down 10 steps, and it's a metaphor, right? You can use an elevator if you want, but you're going down deeper and deeper, relaxing more and more. And then you go through this entrance way, but it's like a force field. It's like shimmering kind of, to kind of represent, okay, now you're going into your unconscious mind. And there's things that you're going to be aware of. Like when people go down the steps, you go down your first step, and you either step with your left foot or your right foot.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I definitely step right.
And you might not know which one you use, but you put either your left foot or your right foot, your shoe on, your socks on, put your pants in, right? And you might not be aware of that, but subconsciously you absolutely know. Or somebody say, are you right thumbed or left thumb? And people are like, what is that? Put your hands together. Which one's on top, the left or the right?
Yes.
And you're like, oh, for me, it's left. Because if I do right, it's like, oh, that's
Yeah,
weird.
it feels
Like,
terrible.
but consciously, most people are like, what do you mean? I don't know. But you would automatically do it. So we have people go down, they relax, they start to practice and get in touch with these different aspects. And then there's 3 seats or stools. And then this first guide comes in, and you have a question for them. And it could be someone could be a real person, could be a real person who's no longer there. Could be a historical figure, it could be an archetype, like of whatever. And so then, we go through like gifts, symbols, etc. And pretty much to a person who they thought would appear, it'd be like, okay, I know who's going to appear, these 3 people, and it's not. And
Yeah.
they're like, I haven't thought of that person in like 30 years. It was my high school teacher or, whatever. And so that's really surprising. And then there's that theme. And people, I mean, a lot of times it's a very powerful experience because it's like, guys, this is your mind. Like,
Yeah.
why did that show up?
Yeah.
What's the message? So, or sometimes we'll go like, another thing we do is your inner team, which is kind of based loosely on internal family systems, a guy named Richard Schwartz. So if you think about like family work, therapy. So let's say you have a girl maybe who is anorexic. Well, that just doesn't affect her.
Sure.
Imagine as a parent, you're like, oh my God, right? Or the siblings and who gets more attention and how do they feel? I mean, it's the whole system.
For sure.
So then the internal families approach is like, all right, what are different aspects of you, different parts of you? So you've got yeah, we can do anything, assertive. And then there's a creative part or a sensitive part or a shy part or this part. And so some were like, yeah, that got us to there. Yeah, I can do anything, resilient, like your 12-hour, your 20X, right? You have to be that hoo-yah, suck it up mentality. But that's not always the best mentality for everything.
Right.
And so people then like, who shows up? And it's always like, oh, here's this part of me, and it's a kid. And here's this part, and it's always a different age. And also when we do like, physical, mental, emotional, and kind of spirit to a person, I've noticed a lot of people, the emotional part is always a kid, always, usually less than 10 years old.
Interesting.
And so when people struggle with like a big decision, like, should I move? Should I take this job? Should I do this? There's different, it's just a metaphor, right? Parts, but there's different aspects, different memories, different values, different belief systems that sometimes they get overridden by that very loud, confident part. But that other part that's like, I'm scared, or, but I'll miss all my friends. Suck it up.
Yeah.
Guess who's going to show up later?
The unheard one.
The unheard one. Yeah. And you see that, like, if your kids, if they're not getting attention, they'll get attention some way.
Yes.
They'll get attention some way. So it's kind of like, people are surprised at kind of who shows up or how they show up, but they realize that they all need attention and they're all valid. And they're all trying to help you. And another thing, this is more like one-on-one. I say, how old does that part think you are? And they always think, they think I'm 8 years old. Okay. And you're like,
Interesting.
hey, I'm an adult. I have a car. I actually have a spouse. I have kids. And it's always the same. They're always like, oh, it thinks I'm a kid and I need that protection. That's why it's working overtime. And so I think it's somewhat cathartic for people to realize, number one, we all have multiple aspects, and that's beauty. That's the diversity of perspectives and values. And it's not like beliefs are this thing that's like stamped in, stone and it never changes. No, they change all the time, depending on what mood you're in, what energy, perspective. And then just like any other team, how do you value all of them? And also you'll be like, hey, you love you. Awesome. Maybe dial it back a little bit. And also I'm going to give you some time off. You don't need to be here 24/7. You know, show up sometime. And it's like a little more cowbell, like bring that up. Like your part, you're being quiet. So that I think people find surprising.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
also, okay, so as you're describing this, something that really strikes me is that for somebody who maybe hasn't experienced a practice to this degree where they can sort of identify these sub elements of who they are, or they can understand who, whose voice is ringing the loudest. It really strikes me how this could really show someone the power of their mind, like
Yeah.
how truly powerful it is, and that the potential is through the roof compared to what
Yeah.
you may have believed it to be.
Right.
What are some of the factors that go into making this a successful practice where you're starting to not only like have maybe a little bit different internal experience, but then like the environment around you starts to be informed by doing this type of practice? What are some of the more important things for people to know about
Yeah.
making this a success?
So the system that I have, so my name's Jim Brault, mine Jim Brault, because I want it to be kind of funny, like serious, but it's not that serious. Like it's just training, like have fun. So the system is called 20-4-6. 20 is 20 minutes. And it's not my idea, it's research. So research shows the greatest parasympathetic or rest and relax kind of side of our nervous system is stimulated at about 16 minutes. So they've done like meditation and different things, and they're like, I mean, it's not like one or the other. It's kind of, the relative balance of the two, sympathetic and parasympathetic. But the peak parasympathetic, at least the research I've seen, shows like around 16 to 20 minutes. That's when it's the highest. So if you're like, oh, I did it for 5 minutes, like, hey, if you worked out for 5 minutes, let me know how that goes. Cause I don't know, maybe you're unique. It's like, it's gotta be some time. And people are like, oh, I want to hack. And if I got 5 minutes, then do something else. Really read a book, scroll. You got to put the time in. So that's it, 20 minutes. Because people are like, can I do it for 10? Like, okay, you're going to get a 10-minute response. Again, it's not my idea. But once you're able to access that state, you can go faster. So you're like, whap, you drop into it fast. So that's it, 20 minutes. Second is 4. And that is the 3 dimensions of space, right? Like if you just ran, I've had people go, oh, I don't need to train my legs because I run. Do you run sprints?
Sideways?
Yeah. Do you run sideways? Do you run backwards? Then probably. No, I just run forwards. Okay. Probably at the same pace. Like you absolutely need to train your legs because it's only one plane of motion, right? Are you doing curtsy lunges? Are you doing squats? Are you doing with weight? Are you doing no. Okay. So the 3 dimensions of time, just like I said, if someone says, oh, I've got this issue, this dynamic, this, whatever, I want to act this way, but sometimes I act this way and, it's not great. Okay. If you thought of that issue, where would it be? And they're always like this squid on my face. It's always like right in front of them. Okay, cool. Now, because you did the basic training, you learned how to make a box. And you learned how to put it on the left and right and above you and below you and behind you. Now you go, what if you put that problem, that issue behind you, like physically? And then people are like, you could see it in their face. They're like, because they're aware of it logically, but they don't have an emotion because you're like, oh, just like you tell a story, the story's not true, or the story may be true for you. But if you ask like someone else, they'll be like, I don't know. Quick story. And let me come back. So I have 2 sisters, 2 brothers. So we were at a wedding a few years ago. And my older sister said, remember when Jen, our younger sister, was talking to Dad, our father, topless? And we're like, what? Yeah, at the cottage, he was talking to him topless. And like my dad's Joe Catholic, right? And I'm like, I don't think that happened. She said, yeah. And she's like convinced. So Jen wasn't there. We called one of my brothers and he's like, no, that wouldn't happen. And then we called Jen. She's like, no, of course not. And my sister's looking at us like, no, it happened. Like, okay, in your memory, it happened, but no, that never happened. So we create stories, we create stuff. So we also have a pattern of how we represent things.
Mm.
So if you go, oh, what if it's here? Okay, cool. That's your starting. That's your story. That's your pattern. Now put it 1,000 yards away. Or make yourself bigger. Make yourself huge. How do you feel? You have a very different relationship to that. You didn't change anything, except, you don't even have to say feel confident. Make yourself bigger. Or shrink that problem. Now put that problem off to your right. Put it to your left. Which feels better, left or right? You know, like when you get glasses and they go better, worse, better.
Yeah.
So same thing. Is it better or worse? Put it behind you. It's behind you now. Put it beneath you. So what you learn is it's just like if we were to do a lunge whatever you want. Do you want to play tennis? Do you want to hike? Do you want to play with your kids? Do you want to, whatever. It's just a movement.
Yeah.
So now you're like, okay, you learn to create a box and then you learn to put it in different places. It's just like a lunge. Now use it for your life. You got this issue, put it 1,000 yards away. Put it in the past, put it in the future, put it down to your left. How do you feel? Or make yourself bigger, make yourself smaller.
Yeah.
So those are the 3 dimensions and how you use space with your mind. Because if it's not here, right? Like if someone physically was this far, they either want to fight you or kiss you. And you're like, okay, who are you?
You're 2 inches away.
Yeah. But the same thing, like when we think about problems, we make them that close. And think about it. If someone was that close to you that you didn't really like physically, you'd be like, right? You'd be like, what are we fighting? What's happening?
Right.
So you can move that. Then the 4th, so 20 minutes, 4. So that's how you use dimension. Or like one of the things we do is I call it crystal clear lake. You're in a lake and you like breathe in and it's a whirlpool and then it goes like through you. And then you exhale and your thoughts, your energy, emotion go up in the bubble and they break through and they ripple out. So it's a 4-part breath.
Yeah.
So now you feel that flow, you feel that letting go, and then you see it ripple out. Well, guess what? Those ripples are your energy. Like, how does it feel to be around you? What are those ripples? And they go wherever they go. Sometimes they're like, oh, that's way farther, or they went in different places. Like you can't control that, but that's your energy. Do you want that energy out? So that's sort of how to use the 3 dimensions. Then the 4th dimension is going backwards in time and forwards in time, like the infinity loop that we did. If you were there, like go a minute forward, then a minute back, and then an hour, a day, a week, and you go out in time. And then you can see like, oh, how can I bring things that I like that I've been doing consistently forward in time? And not to get overwhelmed, but it's like, hey, just do this for a minute.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I want to, your dietitian background. It's like, oh, I want to eat this. Well, okay, you can do that later. But for this minute, okay, you can, in a minute, you could do it, right? And then an hour, then just today, tomorrow, do whatever you want, but just today. And then you can build it. And then you could be like, what have you been holding on to? Or what do you keep doing and bringing forward? And if you go 25 years in the past and you're like, holy smokes, if I don't change, I'm going to bring that another 25 years. There'll be 50 years that I've been doing this thing. Like, at some point, like, when's that going to shift?
Yeah.
Or you can go back in time to that event. Again, this is more one-on-one, but like some people go back and they had a trauma. So you can go back with your adult self, with your kid self, like maybe the day before it happened, and then you're there. And so you can comfort that younger you, make sense of it, because you're like, I don't know what just happened.
Yeah.
In a therapeutic sense, it can get into like, wow, there's trauma there, like real significant stuff. And other times it's not, sexual trauma or, getting physically hit, but it's, the way the parent might have tried to encourage the kid. And it's like, not not trauma as most people would think about it, but it definitely left an imprint. Like,
Right.
you got to do more to get love. So it's conditional. And if you don't do that, you're not good enough. So a lot of overachievers, it's not so much that I'm not doing enough, it's I'm not enough.
Yeah.
And if you think I'm not enough, then no amount of doing is going to solve that. Because
Right.
that you're trying to solve a problem that's the wrong thing. You're like, oh, if I do this, then I'll be loved. Or if I do this, then I get that. So that's that dimension in time. And then the last six, so the six is six senses. So the five senses. And that sixth sense is kind of both that feeling of interoception. So internal perception, or it's called interoception. So like, things move through your stomach, you feel that, that's interoception, or breathing. But it's also that flow, like that qigong movement, and you feel that, which to an earlier point is, oh, people feel that. And then you can feel when you don't have it.
Yeah.
Right? You can feel when you don't have it.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, I'm tensing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I have like goosebumps because I get so excited when there's like an obvious opportunity for freedom of choice, freedom of how you respond. And these types of practices create that, right? Because the closer and closer you can get to like, oh, interesting, that's happening in me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
instead of just the automatic decision, you get to make a decision that you want in that time that makes sense for you. That
Yeah.
is like, I mean, it's so exciting for people to experience that level of freedom, even on one choice, let alone like a
Yeah.
host of different things in their lives.
Yeah. And I love that. I love that you said that. So the Mind Gym Bro app is 6 weeks of basic training. We call it basic training. Then there's advanced training, but you need the basics. Like,
Yes.
just like you said, would you go in your first day, start doing box jumps? No, you probably kill yourself.
Yeah.
So you've got to do some things that then allow you to take advantage of these other things. So one of the sessions, they're like 20-minute sessions on the app, is get some air, AIR, and it's awareness, interrupt, and replace. So you have this awareness of, oh, my mind is going there, my body's going there. And you're like, I learned that pattern of thinking, I learned that pattern of breathing, I learned that pattern of tension, which is exciting because if you learned it, you can unlearn it.
Right.
And like other people don't have that. Like other people respond very differently. And you're like, well, they do? Yeah. And so then you're like, how do you have that awareness? And you're slowed down. You're like, okay, now you start to create those patterns. One of the weeks of training in the 6 weeks basic training is called What Fires Together. And it's from Freud, Sigmund Freud's quote, who said, what fires together wires together. So, we have a stimulus, and then we have a thought or an emotion. It's usually an emotion, right? And then those get put together, like, Ivan Pavlov's rings the bell, feeds the dog. So, we have wiring to a lot of things. We have wiring to smells. We have wiring to certain tones of voice. So like, someone could say something, and if you just look at the words, you're like, meh, but you hear the tone, and it wasn't just that tone. It was the first time and the second time and the third time and fourth time. And then it stacks up. So then your response relative to that one thing is so way over the top. But if you go, but how was it in response to that? It was like, yeah, it makes sense. Right.
Yeah.
Because they're not responding to this. They're responding to this.
Yeah. Not to one thing, the whole stack.
Yeah. The whole stack. Yeah. And so they blow their stack, right?
Yeah.
Because they're responding to that. So, so when you look at that and go, all right, what's another way? Because you learn that over time, but how can you let it go? How can you, what's a change you can make? How do you let that go? How do you make a different decision? And so you can have that objectivity, like you watch yourself on the
Yeah.
screen. So, right. Or different chairs. There's different approaches to do it, but they all involve some degree of objectivity. So it's not you. And if you start to tense, back off, change the color, change the sound, change the size, make it farther away. All of a sudden, you kind of get desensitized to it. You're like, all right, it's neutral. Imagine she comes in, imagine he comes in, imagine this happens, and you get desensitized. And then you can start to build new patterns. And so what I say is, like, one of the other things is called life is a highway. And it's like we all have these 7-lane highways in our brain. And it's like, we think that WAP and it's there. And there's a lot of goodness there. But when you're trying to change a pattern, what most people do is like, oh, I got this, stress response. And then I'm like, I'm going to be calm. And it's like this little dirt path. You got to like get a machete out. And you're like, guess which one you're going to choose under stress? You'll go to that 7-lane highway every time.
Every time. Oh my
Every time.
gosh.
So,
Yeah.
so we're like, all right, not only do you have to make this one deconstruct it. So we're like, okay, you got that big Department of Transportation truck with the arrows, and you got to put your blinker on and like, thank you. No one can hear you. And you keep going over, and then it's to a standstill. So it just doesn't make sense to go there anymore. And then you look over to the right and you see this new path, and then it's 1 lane, and then it's 2, and then it's 3, it's 4, it's 5, 6, 7. So you not only have to deconstruct this one, but you have to construct this one. Otherwise you just go back. It's just human nature.
Yeah.
So awareness, good. You got to interrupt this or deconstruct, and then you got to replace it, and you have to make it strong. That's where you can replace and reinforce with those 6. So it's not like, oh, I have this vision board. Great. But how do you feel?
Yeah.
What's the sound? What's the smell? How does it taste? Like what's flowing? Do you feel it tense? Do you feel open? Do you feel expansive? So now people are like, oh, now you start to make all these connections.
Yeah.
So this new behavior has all these connections. So it's powerful. So it's fast.
Yeah.
And it's powerful because you have to override this one.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So you have the starting program, you have the advanced program, you also do one-on-one coaching. How can everybody find out about your amazing work and get started?
So the program is the Mind Gym Bro app, and it's monthly subscription. So it's $20, like, hey, $19.99, right? It's cheap. So you go first your 6 weeks basic training, then you go do advanced as part of it, like, and you have that. So you can always go back to the other ones, and then always do the advanced one. And I add them all the time. And then people can get coached one-on-one. So Mind Gym Bro, all one word, Mind, GYMBRO.com.
Perfect.
And I'll tell you everything you know.
Perfect. And we'll share it in the show notes. I know you're on Instagram. Awesome. I'm not on tons of platforms. Anywhere else you want people to look for Mind Gym Bro?
Yeah, at Mind Gym Bro on Instagram, Facebook. Yeah, it's all there. Well, wow. Thanks for having me. This has been a blast.
Yeah, I could talk about this stuff for a real long time, but I appreciate just the enthusiasm you have for it, and just the nuances of the way you approach it are so effective. Because it's so multidimensional. To your point when we started, like taking all of these things that work together.
Yeah.
It's not just one thing that might work over here. It's like this whole conglomeration. I just really appreciate that so much.
Yeah.
So,
well, thanks.
and
it's also like what works for you.
Mm-hmm.
You can't say, oh, it works. It's like, hey, does it work for you? What works best for you? So no, I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. And thank you everybody for listening. We'll catch you next time.